Titanic Talk with Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries and everything else to do with the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Join us and our special guests as we continue the 25th anniversary celebrations of Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams.
My name is Nelson Aspen. Although in a past life it was Milton Long Jr., first-class passenger of the Titanic, but that's why we're here. We're here at Titanic Talk to talk about all things Titanic with my lovely co-host, Alexandra Boyd, not only a star of James Cameron's masterpiece film Titanic, but also the filmmaker, producer, director, writer of the new documentary, Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries. So Alexandra and I are excited to welcome a very esteemed guest. He may not have been in the movie, but he's done everything else related to all things Titanic. William Brower, you're such a multi-hyphenate, I can't even give you the proper introduction you deserve. Alexandra, how should we describe him?
I think we shall describe him first and foremost as a Titaniac. I don't know how you feel about that moniker, but many of the Titaniacs we know are proud to use it. And that goes for somebody who has immersed themselves either from a child because of knowing the history and being fascinated by death and tragedy and hubris, and then later connected to the James Cameron film, or not, you know. And I think William might be proud to call himself a Titaniac. William, what would you say?
Very much so, yes. I'm extremely super proud and beaming Titaniac. In fact, locally here in South Florida, people, including a lot of the press and everyone else, actually refer to me as the Titanic Man. So
that's incredible. So you really have established yourself. You've made it a life's work.
I have, yes. This August, it's going to mark 43 years of research into the ship for me.
And do people now come to you because you are such an authority?
I've been very fortunate that, yes, I've had that happen on occasion, including one of my first full credited projects was with a young filmmaker named Tom Linsky about 10 years ago, who actually had adapted the Harold Bride's interview into a short film called The Last Signals. And so, I was able to assist on the production as one of the consultants, as well as a whole panel of other recognized historians.
Oh, well, is that available to watch on YouTube or somewhere? We'll put a link to that.
Yes, it is.
Reading your biography, which is so extensive, I mean, there are just so many, you hold so many titles. But the one that interests me, you were the first U.S. ambassador to the Titanic Heritage Trust. Now, I think that was 2013, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
yes.
So, but if you go back to your middle school, the early promise was that you were dubbed the young Stephen King. So you sort of went from the sort of fantastical, metaphysical, paranormal, if you will, world, and you moved into history. So what was the defining moment, since you are so so versatile and multi-talented in your various genre, but what was the defining Titanic moment for you?
Well, for me, it actually comes to the opening of James Cameron's film. So, just for some backstory for you, my whole interest in Titanic, believe it or not, started when I was about 5 years old, and I used to spend the summers with my grandfather. And so it was one of those cases where we were going to go off to the movies, but we got stuck in traffic. So our original choice we missed. But when I was walking out of the theater, I saw the promo film poster for Raise the Titanic.
Ah, yes. Clive Cussler.
That's the one. So, being in Florida, obviously, scuba diving, anything water related, I already had an automatic interest in. So we ended up catching the film. And, for those who haven't seen it, it opens with archive photos of the real ship. And so, there we are sitting in the front row, and I'm looking up, and I was just absolutely enamored. And so by the time we finished the film, I was running almost 6 million miles a minute, just like, was this a real ship? Was that a real person? Did that really happen? Blah, blah, blah. And, instead of blowing it off, we did a side trip over to the bookstore, and my grandfather bought me the book A Night to Remember. And then he kind of gave me the very generic story over ice cream. And then before bed, over the course of the summer, he would read one chapter per night.
Yeah, it reads like a thriller. You almost can't believe that this happened to all these people.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why even to this day, it's still within the bestsellers list of almost every paper, even though the book has been out since 53.
Was your grandfather a Titaniac, or was he just a good grandfather who just sort of instinctively nurtured your interests?
He just was naturally more a good grandfather than anything else, but he always made it a point to incorporate it as almost like life lessons. So that's how, when I first learned about proper etiquette, the basics of navigation. So before GPS, I knew how to work a compass and plot charts on the map if I needed to, and things along those lines. And then before he passed, he had asked if I would promise to educate others as he did for me. And so that's precisely what I made it a point to do from that point forward. And so, with the film coming out and obviously, keeping a promise and everything else, it hit me on a much greater emotional level than the general audience. And, it actually turned out to be a very funny moment too, because during the course of watching it, I was sitting obviously in the front row again, just for prosperity's sake. And it's not that I intended to do it, but I accidentally scared the 7 rows behind me by the time we got into the second act of the film. And I had a lady behind me, kind of lean over, and she goes, "Are you crying because of Leo?" and I looked back and I'm like, "No, that's my ship."
We have some beautiful, beautiful graphics in my documentary, which came to us by Titanic Honor and Glory.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you're very familiar, because we've used little bits of the film, but you have to use them sparingly under a sort of fair use clause. But we've replaced it with other images of the ship. And you're making me think of Nelson. The first time he saw the opening shot of our trailer, his heart skipped a beat. He was like, "Oh, there she is," because we have this beautiful, like 180-degree, I call it a seagull's eye view of the ship, where it sort of starts on one side as she's sailing and goes all the way around. And it really is, and they put a little bit of sound in there. You can hear the engines going, and you can hear the water moving. And it's just,
you could still smell the fresh paint. No, we are obviously kindred spirits. You'll appreciate just the love of the vessel. Is significant for people like us. The dreadful Wolfgang Petersen remake of Poseidon Adventure.
Oh, God, yes.
The best moment of that film was the opening sequence with going around the ship. We followed Josh Lucas as he ran around the deck of the ship, and from there it was all downhill and upside down. But the beauty of the ship. So I love that it moved you to tears and probably still has the power. Your one-man lecture and exhibition is called Titanic: The Legacy Remains. So tell us about that and how you feel, in your opinion, how the legacy remains.
Well, right off the bat, that was my initial groundwork started almost immediately after I graduated high school. And it was just one of those cases where the timing was perfect, because this was early 1995. And I had attended the Titanic International Convention at the time. And, I had the opportunity of meeting with Walter Lord and Melvina Dean, who was the youngest survivor, and George Tulloch.
She had the pig, right? She had the pig with the twisty tail.
No, that you're thinking of Edith Rosenbaum.
Edith Russell. She had the pig.
Yeah. but Melvina had some stories all of her own, and one of the most memorable weekends I could ever anticipate. And so, understandably, by the time I got back, James Cameron had already made the announcement that he's working on a brand new movie. And, so, for myself, I was automatically always doing these mini lectures through my local Borders books, because they were always open for providing local entertainment and things to that effect. So I automatically just signed up for that. And what I decided to do was actually take it from a different approach, because for myself, I don't like just standing there and just delivering things. It's too monotone. You can lose the audience too quickly. And so what I did to start with was I contacted 4 survivors that I was friends with over the years. And I asked them if it would be okay for me to adapt elements of some of their experiences in order to convey the whole aspect of Titanic to a live audience.
Give it more of a personal story aspect. These are the personal stories of these people.
Yeah.
It's always much more important. Yes.
And fortunately, they absolutely agreed with it, and said, listen, if you're going to do it, just give the memory proper respect. That's all that we ask. And I'm like, I will definitely.
Were these monologues in a way?
Well, these are a combination of monologues and also a little bit of some audience interaction as well too. One of the primary fun things that I would do, just to help really convey the point across, is in the front of if I were standing on a stage, in the center of it, I actually would have a tank of 28-degree water. So, and I would sit and I would let them know, go ahead and stick your hand into it, and let's see how long you could last in there. And then as it got closer, further along story-wise, once we got into the elements of the sinking itself, obviously depending on the size of the venue and things to that effect, I always wanted to make it as interactive as possible. So, I did everything from changing the lights. So each time that we would come further, the ship's sinking even further, one section of the room would already shut down, because at that point, the power has already gone out in that area. So that's forcing the audience to come closer towards another point until we get to the final moments where there's just one single light and then everybody crowded all around the platform. And I'm like, and this is exactly what it looks like in the final 10 minutes.
Ingenious. And
yes.
you're an esteemed and respected collector. So, I mean, are there certain items would you take, or are they just too valuable? Do you have them, in a safe place? So speak to your collection.
Oh, wow. My collection spans my 43 years of research. So I have a little bit of everything. I like to joke and say that my house is a wayward home for Titanic memorabilia. Because, 9 times out of 10, if the movie's coming out, or if there's going to be a new book coming out, kind of the double-edged sword, but I can anticipate at least 5 or 6 copies of said item being delivered from random people that have like, oh, I saw this, thought of you. I don't know if you have this yet. So
chances are you do. What's on your wish list? If Santa Claus is watching right now, what's on your wish list?
This is catching. Look, I just got the double album because I bought a little LP player, and I bought a double album with all the. It's still in its plastic. I haven't even played it yet.
Oh, it'll be well worth it though. So I mean, but I would say for my wish list, ultimately, I trust. Are you familiar with a group called Ocean Gate? They're a high-end company that do expedition type vacations, and they actually do dives to Titanic. Oh,
isn't it like $250,000 to go down, but you have to work on the ship and you learn, you're not just a passenger or a cruiser, you are actually working on the ship. Yes, I have heard of those. Yes.
Oh, yes. I'll tell you this much. The manager at my local bank usually cringes because if I'm setting an appointment to talk to him, that means I'm attempting something. And as soon as Ocean Gate launched and went public like that, I was just like, "Hi, guess what? You're gonna probably hate me, but can I borrow $200,000?" My credits.
I'm with you. With all due respect to Elon Musk and Richard Branson, I'd so much rather go down than go up.
Exactly, because I mean, at the end of the day, we've only explored not even 5% of the oceans in general. So who knows what else is down there?
It's incredible. Share with our audience where we can find all your what you would recommend for the Titanic fans, where to start in the world of William Brower, whether it's your Instagram or your books. Tell us where we can get our Titanic on.
Well, very simple. I have 5 books that I've written. My most popular one is my own research memoirs, which is called Touched by the Titanic. And if you want something that's not quite as heavy and emotional, because I literally bore my soul into that one, I do have a side book that I did that it was kind of more of a writing challenge that some friends of mine had put me up to, and I call it Titaniacs Among Us.
Aha!
And what it is, it's a generalized parody of the Titanic community as a whole, but written as a promotional pamphlet as a PSA. And
how many of your Titaniacs have read this and go, oh yeah, if you ask these 10 questions, yes, I'm yes to every single one. Is that sort of, you might be a Titaniac if.
Exactly. And I believe it or not, I've actually had almost 100 people that have read it and were like, not only is this spot on, but did you put a camera in my house?
That's right. They know you very well. They know you very well indeed. And in our documentary in Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries, there's obviously the strong element of the actors who played supporting roles in the film, and some of them played real people, so they got to do their own research. But I had to balance it with the people like yourself who are so passionate about the story and the film. They're just indelibly connected now. And I always hesitate to say, are you a Titaniac? And people are like, yes, of course I'm a Titaniac. Of course they're proud to announce it. And it's just for Nelson and me too, we're just learning how warm and how vast and worldwide the stories go. And we could talk to somebody every day about their passion or their knowledge for this film, and it's extraordinary. William, do you have an idea why, in all of your 43 years of research, do you know why this story is so captivating for people?
I think it's because of the fact that even though it's been 111 years, not only is it still so newly ingrained over the course of these generations, but at the end of the day, too, though, it's because of the simple fact that you have 2,208 people that are on board, and that means 2,208 stories. You can find a common similarity somewhere within those deck levels, and it's just one of those things.
And the people on the Carpathia and the Californian and the people waiting for them in New York. I mean, the degrees of separation just keep going and going and going. We all seem to have our I don't want to say characters, because we can have they're real life people, but with whom we identify. Is there a certain person from the Titanic lore that you particularly gravitate toward?
Well, I actually have 2. One of course is Thomas Andrews. I've always admired just his note taking and his observations of things. For a little while before Belfast became quite the hubbub, at one point Harland and Wolff actually was selling copies of Andrews's notebooks from Olympic, and it was just fascinating to see. Not only you can tell just from the words the level of pride as he's putting in the notations, but he's like, well, there's too many stateroom code hooks in section with this blah blah blah. We need to bring this down by 1. That will make it a lot more better. This looks great how it is now, but how can we improve it? And I found that to be just absolutely fascinating, and especially coming from doing it from a creative perspective, I was able to incorporate that as I started to develop some of my own writing as well too.
So given that background that he had, imagine that last 2 hours of his life that he saw this extraordinary project literally sinking away from him, and he knew he was going to go with it.
I love the legend of him setting the clock, just to make sure everything was perfect right until the end, as much as it could be. Who's the other one?
The other one is a gentleman by the name of Jacques Futrell. And
tell us his story.
Well, he actually was a best-selling mystery author who was, coming, using the Titanic as just a means of travel and such. A lot of my colleagues have said that if I put up the right hat on and change my glasses to a 1912 style, I can easily have passed for him. But I always say, well, that's all fine and dandy, but I definitely do not want to share his fate. His work became famous posthumously.
Yes, you don't want the parallels to be too exact.
Was he a first class, second class, third class? What was a little bit of his background?
Oh, he was first class, and it's one of those cases where there's actually a very famous photograph where he's mistakenly identified by Francis Brown, and it's actually a different passenger, but he's listed as being the gentleman standing outside of the gymnasium. Have you ever seen Father Brown's Titanic photographs?
Yes.
So, yeah, that's what
Francis Brown would be a good one to be, if you were going to go back as somebody, because he got off the ship in time. He got to go on the ship, but he got to get off the ship.
But ironically, don't forget, he also had the invitation to stay for the whole trip. So
see, there's an art to knowing when to leave the party. Remember that?
Exactly.
So where do you go? Because now we live in a world where, you had mentioned conventions and where there were gatherings. And I know growing up in Philadelphia, it was a big deal, like to go into Philadelphia for a Titanic themed event. And that was back in the 70s, before there was an internet connecting the world. How do you connect? Tell us about your social media presence and also the live in person things you do.
Well, social media wise, you can find me on Facebook, and basically what I'll do is I'll look at them and see what are some of the events and such, and if it sounds like something that's definitely really interesting, or if it's a odd perspective and approach towards it, I'll actually reach out and inquire about it. But very similar to like what I did with Alexandra when I. When one of the descendants was like, "Hey, have you seen this trailer yet? This is a new filmmaker who worked on the Cameron film," and Alexandra, your trailer blew me away. I mean, that's why I left you that long-winded.
Wait till you see the whole thing.
I have to say, if you think I started just as an actress in that film, which was a huge privilege, we all look back and go, oh my God, what an experience. Never before, never again will we have that kind of an experience on a film, because they're just not going to make films like that anymore. And then myself growing and morphing into a filmmaker and having these diaries, having these first-person accounts. And I do not want to put any disrespect to the real survivors of Titanic, who, of course, have all passed away now. But I almost, talking to everyone on this podcast, Nelson, I almost feel like we as the actors, we're sort of helping to support and carry on the legacy, especially actors who, like Peter White, who's completely cut from the film, but played Third Officer Groves, who's on the Californian, who all went to bed and didn't hear the SOS, or to Liam Toohey, who played the baker. They're deeply connected to the characters they played, because, 25 years later, people are still talking to them about them, and myself.
Well, the legacy remains. It's like what you're saying now about the actors, Alexandra, is what William was saying earlier about Walter Lord. I mean, Walter Lord was really, in addition to being an author, but he was a correspondent. He was reporting the story of Titanic in novel form. It really is journalism, it's not just prose. It's journalism, and that's why I'm very partial to the Night to Remember film. I guess that's what launched my interest. I certainly saw that long before I saw Titanic. So yeah, I mean, you are carrying on. You actors are from Titanic are carrying on a legacy much the same way that Walter Lord did it for his generation, and now we're doing it through this amazing medium that didn't exist before. And Titanic itself was a groundbreaker when you think about the first time that the SOS code was used and the modern marvels of its day, that some worked and some didn't.
Yeah, I mean, working telephones. Who would have thought?
That's right. We had a very interesting conversation in another episode of the podcast that folks can watch, where we spoke to a clinical psychologist whose one of his areas of expertise is the study of failure and how to come back from failure, how to learn from failure, how to cope with failure. And he lists Titanic among one of the great failures of all time, and that causes some controversy in itself. How do you feel about that? I mean, yes, it sank, but what was the problem with Titanic? Why? Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about it if it hadn't been a disaster. What do you feel was the problem? Why didn't it work for Titanic?
Well, I think it's just because of two things, and one being a lot more critical, and you'll understand why. But to start with, the watertight compartments were never capped. They only went as high as E deck, and that's just one of those cases. They never, obviously, at the time, they never anticipated or thought ahead of time to raise them all the way through the ship itself, like we see on modern ships. And the other one, which is the more critical one, was during the course of the sinking, Charles Lightoller, the second officer, actually gave an order to a group of crew members to go down to D deck and to open up the gangway door to actually bring passengers that were still inside out to the lifeboats through there. And obviously at that point, the crew members did what they were told, but they also were never seen again. But if you look at the pictures of the wreck, there is the D deck door open. And so, given the fact that particular access point leads straight into the reception room and then everything else, that probably substantiated the rate of the flooding a lot more than what we could have anticipated. So, and of course, we know what happens at the end.
Yes, yes.
Are you a cruise aficionado? Do you take cruises? Do you enjoy them, or stay?
Without a doubt. I mean, if you ever want to see a walking encyclopedia of irony, okay, I love cruises. Loved being on the open sea. I have no problem whatsoever with ships or anything like that. And I also happen to be a Pisces. So,
happy birthday, belatedly.
Well, thank you. So yes, understandably, if you say cruise, free cruise, or anything like that, I'm already going to be standing at the pier and like, bags packed, let's go.
Do you do your talks on cruises? Because I know James Pinker, who's part of Titanic Honor and Glory, he said, I had this idea to do talks about Titanic on a cruise, thinking nobody would show up, and they're packed. His talks are packed on these cruise liners.
Oh yeah. For me, I generally try to stay more on the behind the limelight and just enjoy the experience itself. But I did have one moment that I found to be absolutely hysterical. And about 10 years ago, I finally had enough free time in between some of my own projects that I took my wife on her first cruise, and for the formal night, they have a choice of some of the backdrops and things like that. And ironically enough, they had the grand staircase.
I've seen this on the internet, a picture of you in front of the staircase.
Yes. Well, it's so funny because when we went to go pick up the prints, everybody, now bear in mind, we're in the Caribbean, so there's no ice or anything like that, but everyone was like, I'd like a picture of us with the, the staircase. You mean the Titanic one? No, the staircase? Don't say that name. We're at sea.
Oh, it's all right. It's not like saying Macbeth. It's all right.
Yeah, precisely, So, but I mean, but it was just, but even that within itself is just fascinating because, like I said, it was a Caribbean cruise, but no matter what, the reference and everything else.
You're on a ship.
Yeah.
Now, we're coming up on the anniversary of the sinking. Obviously, we don't know when people will be watching this particular episode, but we're recording it shortly before the anniversary of the sinking. Do you commemorate April 14th, 15th in any particular way, or is it just sort of omnipresent?
Oh, no. I actually have an annual tradition, and you also just reminded me that I need to actually get my flyer ready to pass to the neighborhoods. Believe it or not, every April 14th at 11:40, I have a family relic. It's an old ship's bell. It's been in my family for many generations, and I'll ring it 3 times.
Nice.
And then from there, I watch A Night to Remember all the way through. And then, when it gets to about 2:20, I have a moment of silence and I light a candle in honor of those who were affected. And then at 10 after 4, I light another candle to reflect on Carpathia's rescue.
And at 5 o'clock, your wife is like, William, come to bed.
Yeah, probably. I mean, she tried buttering through the first time. And
that's so amazing, though, William. That is incredibly... I mean, it's incredible. I bet there's not one person who set sail on that ship that would imagine 111 years later, people would still be so connected to them and to that story. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's the stories that that have been passed down and passed through is what helps to keep the memory and the legacy going. Going back to your question, Nelson, that's why the legacy remains. It's us sitting here now, sharing the stories, and hopefully, if we play the cards the right way, nice little reference there, we can maybe inspire the next generation to continue where we've all left off.
I think that's safe to say. Please do us a favor this year and set up the phone to record you ringing that bell, because I think that needs to be posted on your website or we need to share that, or at least send it to us and we'll add it to the podcast somewhere. We want to see and hear the bell.
Oh, I'll be happy to do so. I normally even do it on Facebook Live these days. So I'll be sure to save the video for you.
We're grateful. Thank you so much. This has been fun, and now you're stuck with us because the Titaniacs are a family. So now we're all in the same family, with adding more branches to the tree.
Well, that's fantastic. Welcome to the family.
Thank you, William. And once again, for everyone listening, we will definitely in the notes put links to your books. And I see behind you there's a URL for webrower2.wixsite.com/writing portfolio. So yep. I imagine anything and everything you need to know about William Brower /Titaniac you can find there. Fantastic.
We'll find out why he was called the young Stephen King. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
that's a very funny story in itself.
Thank you so much, William. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited.